right, everybody, we are back for another episode of The Partnership. I am so excited to be back. I had a 2-month daddy break to welcome a new family member, but we are so back for this show, and especially this episode. I'm really excited because we have Jared Fuller with us, who just launched his new book, Nearbound and the Rise of the Who Economy. Thanks so much for joining us, Jared.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. This is my favorite thing to do, is to just show up and geek out on partnerships. So let's do it.
Yes. So first of all, with the book, it's pretty incredible. Like we just talked about it, like thousands of people have already bought it and read it. And I think
Yes.
there was like a post a Nearbound team actually posted today, which was that 80 people posted on social media, just like pictures and reviews and stuff like that. And that's just the social media reviews. There's also like the Amazon reviews, good reviews. And it feels like there's like a really special thing happening right now in partnerships. I think you mentioned it in the book as well. It's like the partnerships is entering the mainstream consciousness now, where it's not
Yes.
just something which is kind of like on the periphery, but it's actually like, something which is going to happen across companies, across, different departments within your company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
so,
mean,
yeah,
absolutely. I talk about this a lot. Like there's an entrepreneurial thread to this that is bigger than just like the partnerships function, which goes back to like, how do you start a business? And, Franz, you saw me from the beginning, launch Partner Hacker. It's
yeah,
like, you better pick an undeniable shift in the world. And that undeniable shift in the world is that I saw GTM, sales and marketing alignment, customer success, like that value chain of direct and cheap access to capital, cheap access to acquiring customers, hitting a wall. Like I knew it was going to happen, and it is
yeah,
happening. And AI is not making it any better for that model. It's only making it worse. So for better or for worse, we are being pulled into the mainstream conversation. I've called it the partnerships moment. And it doesn't mean that we're there, but it means that we have a seat at the table, which means it's more important than ever that we get our stuff together and make something happen.
yeah. Awesome. Well, I am so excited to talk about it. Before we jump in, though, I want to make sure that everybody who's watching today is aware that this is a live show. And so if you're watching, A, let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to hear, where you're joining us from. B, you can ask your questions. Like if you have a question for Jared, because you just read the book, for example, and you want to like elaborate more on it, like this is the time. And then C, we're also doing a giveaway. And so if you enter #Nearbound in the chat, we will actually draw you then as one of the winners, and you can win a hardcover copy of the Nearbound book. And so Jared just released the hardcover. It's pretty cool, especially for somebody who like wants to read up on this more or like have it next to their table when they're like, doing their job just so they can research once in a while. Hardcover is the way to go. So I'm pretty excited about it. I have my copy here. I just got the Kindle because on the day itself, when it was released, I immediately like read half of the book. And the reason why I wanted to have you on the show, great. I feel like the Kindle is like kind of sad because it's like black and white. It's
No,
like
it's no.
it's
I
it's
publish
like
it on every
2024. We
version,
have like color television. Like
and then audiobooks coming out in the next like week or so too. And I actually read the entire audiobook too, so that'll be coming out.
nice. Oh, I'm excited about that. Yeah. So I have the reason why I wanted to get you on the show, Jared, was because I saw that there like partnership, like one of the main tenets of this show or of your book is that partnerships is not like strategy a department in itself. It's a strategy. Partnerships is like a strategy for each individual department. Like there's no partnerships team. There's a partnership strategy for marketing, partnership strategy for sales, etc. And so in the book, there are different chapters about like nearbound sales, nearbound marketing, nearbound product, etc. But you and I geeked out a lot about alliances, which are like the large BD deals, like the giants. And so like part of me was reading this book and like I was just sitting there like the Big Lebowski and I was just like, where are the alliances, Jared? And I realized there is no alliance mentioned here, even though you mentioned like some of the big deals you worked on. So this is the perfect show to like just expand on what you mentioned in the book and explain how can you win these industry giant partnerships with the Nearbound strategy. So I'm really
Yeah,
excited to talk about that.
and this is actually my favorite topic, and it's probably, if it's not my number one distribution piece, it's in the top 3, which is there's a piece I wrote called Strategic Alliances, Partner Up and Play to Win. And that was a chapter from my first book, which was an anthology called The Partner Hacker Handbook. And it's
Yeah.
my favorite piece of content. I love it. Like anytime someone sends it to me, I get DMs all the time. Hey, can you send me the slides that you mentioned in this, chapter? I
Yeah.
love talking about alliances because this is what separates, the winners, I think, oftentimes from the losers, because partnering up implies something pretty interesting, that there's a bigger player than you that you're going to get more value out of than they do. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? You and every other company on the planet would love that, right? Like this is not something that's just easy. Alliances is varsity if partnerships is, junior varsity or C team.
Yeah.
Alliances is like where industries are transformed, markets are shifted, and you can create a category or transform your company, or you can kill it, right? They're dangerous both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, it's fascinating because it's a part of partnerships which isn't talked about very much, but, like, when an alliance breaks, like, everybody knows it. Like, for example, like, Microsoft and OpenAI was all over the news. Like, it was one of the biggest strategic alliances of 2023 probably, but similarly, it can kill your company, right? Because Microsoft actually tried to outsource their AI development to this tiny AI shop somewhere in the Bay, which was run by a weird nonprofit, which almost killed the entire thing, which could have, like, brought down a giant like Microsoft. So these are,
Yeah.
like,
Would
completely company
Microsoft be the
defining
most valuable
decisions.
company in the world right now if Sam wasn't the CEO? And the answer is no. They would have probably lost $500 million in market cap.
Yeah, and people think that, like, OpenAI with, like, their 90 billion valuation, like, that was the big story, but the big story was more like, Microsoft's multi-trillion valuation
Yeah,
could
the
have been
$3 trillion market cap, right?
exactly. Okay, before we geek out more about alliances, I just want to give a shout out to David, who joined us in the chat. Drop the hashtag Nearbound to win the hardcover copy, which is great. And then we have Mary from Cambridge, Ontario, who joined us, and she actually has a paperback already. But I love the spirit. Like, the hardcover is really where it's at, Mary. Especially if you want to research it more often and show it off as like a nice, like, table book, like conversation starter on your coffee table. Cool. So, do you have a definition for strategic alliances? Like, it's something where when you see it, you know it, like Microsoft and OpenAI thing alliance, but what is it?
Here's how I break it down. What's the root of strategic alliance? Well, the root is strategy. And I think strategy is the most misunderstood word in all of startups across entrepreneurs and partner professionals, because strategy is merely choice. That's all that it is. Where will
Yeah,
you play? How will you win? What capabilities must be in place? Like, what's that winning aspiration? And what that means is that you have to have a vision. Here's what I see, Franz. When most people talk strategic alliances, what do? What they do is they come into the partner and they go, I want to have a strategic alliance with you. Fantastic. You and the 1,700 other partners in my ecosystem. So, like, have I done this? Yes, I've signed a $6 million deal with Adobe when I was at Drift, and we were doing about, let's call it 30 million in ARR. We're talking about 20% of our ARR in one deal. This is a
yeah,
big freaking deal. And I don't get the seat at the Adobe table by saying, hey, let's figure out a strategic alliance. It's like, hey, can you figure out how to make me a bunch of money? That'd be real great if you could just like figure out how to make me a bunch of money. No, it's choice. So what choices are you making? So you better have a vision of the world that you're like, hey, we need to go here. It's an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? You're
yeah,
creating something that would not be possible without that partner and without you. And I have a formula on like how to unpack that, but at a high level, it's about making the most strategic choice for your market, for where you're trying to go, for like that joint value proposition, your customers and your business, where the partner can't help but say no to what you are selling. So what are you selling? Because it's not a product, right?
yeah.
You're creating something entirely new from scratch. You actually are it's an act of creation. So it's a choice where you're creating something. So if you don't have a vision, I can guarantee you this, you're not selling a strategic alliance. There isn't one.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think, like, you're touching on a really important point. Like, it's not about you. It's not about what you want. Like, you want more money or whatever. Like, when you were at Drift, you just didn't go to Adobe and say, like, hey, we want more money, Adobe, please give it to us. Like, that's
Right.
not how it
Yeah.
works. Like, you have to do something for Adobe. And I think it's really hard for a startup to wrap their head around, what can I do for a giant like Adobe? And so what was it at Drift that you were able to offer Adobe that made them realize that this was something they wanted to invest in?
So I have a couple stories that I can just tell the formula through the story. I think that's the best way to kind of articulate this, because this
Let's
was
do it.
emergent to me. Maybe I'll start with the PandaDoc and HubSpot story first, then I'll tell the Drift and Marketo
Yeah.
and Adobe one. I actually start the book with the craziest opening line. You idiot, the KGB is here. Like, what? Stalin's KGB? And so I'm in Belarus, and I'm like one of 5,000 Americans that have ever actually been there with HubSpot, with Brad Coffey, the chief strategy officer, at our engineering offices in Minsk, Belarus, right? And
Yeah.
I won't go into the story because it's kind of funny and slightly scary.
You should read it in the book.
Yeah,
Plug.
because this was 1 year to the day almost that I told
Yeah.
Brad Coffee, I know you don't know who I am, but in less than 1 year, I'm going to be your number one partner globally, and you're going to try to buy me. And I was there negotiating the acquisition of PandaDoc and HubSpot.
Yeah.
So like in 1 year, like we went from nobody to their number one partner for all of CRM. Here's what I learned in fulfilling that promise that was very interesting. Here's the first thing. The first thing is you need to understand what your partner's top 3 like public company metrics are that you potentially impact. So for example, at HubSpot at the time, one of their most important KPIs. So like if I went to Brian Halligan at the time, he would say the same thing was what? Trial to paid conversion of HubSpot CRM. Right. So there is these moments in time too. Like not every metric matters to every company the same way at each time, but they just come into SMB CRM and they needed to prove that all this top of funnel could convert to paid users. Right. Great. So that was like first thing. Okay. Free to paid conversion, top 3 metric to CEO. Second thing, well, what correlations in the product or in their funnel actually made that conversion happen? Well, it turns out that the number one indicator as to what moved a deal from open to close one in CRM, like if they moved a deal to close one, they were 7 times more likely to pay than someone who didn't. Right?
Mhm.
Okay, fantastic. So then what do we layer on top of that? Well, HubSpot at the time didn't even have APIs for CRM. So we hacked a Chrome extension, PandaDoc for HubSpot CRM. Like we're literally scraping the DOM and like fake injecting stuff into a document by reading the screen. And what we found out is that if someone had a deal in HubSpot, so we surveyed all of our users, see who would sign up and was using HubSpot CRM, and we pushed them this Chrome extension. And what we found out is that if they were a free user and they sent a document using PandaDoc, then they were 7 times more likely on top of that to become a paying customer. So I was able to show a cohort of users. Now, this wasn't thousands and thousands. This was maybe 100. We're talking SMB. So the sample size is not like enterprise, but it also is not nothing. And I was able to say, look, we're your most important partner for your most important metric. And guess what? Here's the account executives that have been attached to these accounts where we've installed this Chrome extension and they've closed deals. And guess what? They love us too. So that's kind of the third thing. Who in that company is comped based on that top 3 metric, right? And that was the formula to me. It was like, okay, if I can show HubSpot that I can impact their number one metric, I can make it better, right, than they otherwise could by themselves. Yeah. And the people that are comped on that metric were like, we love bringing PandaDoc into deals. Like it helps us close. That is where great partnerships are born.
That's amazing. So it's like figure out what they care about, like what is their key metric, figure out how you impact that metric, and then figure out who within that company actually cares about this.
Yeah, who's comped based on that metric, right?
And it's comped, yeah, makes money of it. I mean, that's why they care, right? Because
exactly. Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the behavior, right?
Yeah, I love it. Great quote. Okay, so I have a question for you. So PandaDoc, like at what stage was PandaDoc when you made this decision? Because one of the things which I think is often misunderstood is that startups just assume like they should like launch an alliance with like a HubSpot or a Microsoft or something like that right out of the gate. Is that the case? Like, do you think it makes sense for a, startup of like 3 dudes in an apartment in San Francisco to like actually like pursue an alliance like that? Or do you think you need a certain kind of scale first?
Well, here's what I would say. This is playing the game on expert mode. This is varsity level stuff like we're talking about here. This is a publicly traded company. And when you say 3 dudes in an apartment in San Francisco, I made that phone call to Brad Coffee from an apartment in San Francisco that was the PandaDoc office that I lived in. So like, and guess what? Like our marketing at the time was like this anorexic looking panda, like slinging documents like he was a drug dealer. Like we had no brand affinity. We had nothing. I was nobody. We were nobody. We had no right to be in that room. But that's when I say it's choice. I made the choice. It was like, I remember Makita, CEO, sitting me down and being like, because I'm kind of like I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, right? I'm good at sales, marketing, success, product. I can do a little bit of everything. Logo design, you name it. Hack in the database, whatever it is. But I'm not great at any of them. And he's like, look, I really think that you should focus on partnerships right now versus the sales funnel, because that's what I was going to be focused on as VP sales. And I was like, okay. Well, who do we partner with? And there was like 80, 90 SMB CRMs. We had to make a choice, right? And that choice was, I was like looking at the market, and I had bought and signed up and used Pipedrive and, ProsperWorks at the time that was integrated with Gmail really tightly, and all these other SMB CRMs. And I'm like, HubSpot's going to win. Why is HubSpot going to win? That choice mattered. It mattered at that time. So you have to be good at making strategic choices. I reference in the book and in that chapter, it's pretty dense. It's a dense read, but if you can stomach it and get the highlights, it's playing to win. It's about strategic choice making, which I think is a phenomenal read. It is dense. It's really like, you don't need to be having these 20-hour workshop sessions that he kind of suggests. But if you can get the highlights from it, that really was the key thing there, is like, if you have conviction and that like this is going to be the winner and we have to be number one, then it isn't even a choice. I'm willing to die on that hill. And I'm going to figure it out. I call it FITFO. Figure it the out, right? Like, no matter what. FITFO. Like I'll tell people on my team, whenever there's something that important, FITFO.
Yeah.
Like, this is that important. Figure it the out.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot to unpack here. Like, one is like conviction, right? Like you need to have that level of conviction. It's hard to do that as a startup when you actually don't have product market fit, or when you don't really know where you're playing, because these alliances take like a long time. Like between that call in San Francisco in an apartment and that meeting where the KGB almost got you, like a year passed. And that's a long time in startup land. Like a year in startup land is like basically 50% of most startups' lifetime, because that's
we did $1 million deal in between that time too, though, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we did $1 million deal in between. And HubSpot. I mean, what happened in between is that I had HubSpot work into their onboarding flow of every single HubSpot CRM sign up. Connect your integrations, and PandaDoc was the one that was highlighted, and you click that email and it took you to connect the PandaDoc integration. How much money do you think we made off of that with 50,000 signups, every month in growing? We made a ton of money. I can point you to like tons of places where I did stuff like this too that doesn't make any sense. If you go to docs.google.com, docs.google.com, like 55 million people see this like every day. It'll say software proposal template by PandaDoc, like in the homepage, just, the brand recognition and stuff on that alone. It's still there like 7-8 years later. But that's awesome. Kind of my point, is that like, people don't understand that these types of things can have an outsized impact early on if you're committed to it and you are that entrepreneurial person. Like, my relationship with Makita, the CEO, was I was every bit as much of an entrepreneur as he was. I didn't own the business. I'm not the founder. I'm not the CEO. But my God, hire someone else if you want someone to follow a playbook and a rule book. Like, we had to go figure it out.
Yeah. I think there's also something really smart around like that approach of like getting like onto the onboarding flow or that first sign up page or something like that of your big partners, because you're getting noticed way before the competition, right? Like, there were probably others like DocuSign and HelloSign and stuff like that. And they were like, they couldn't even reach a customer as fast as you guys could. Because by the time they signed up,
we beat HelloSign. HelloSign was bigger than us, and we beat HelloSign. They got acquired by Dropbox, reduced to nothing, and we were nobody.
Yeah,
we won.
Yeah, because before anybody could even consider it, like, which signing solution would I need? They immediately saw PandaDoc in that onboarding email. We're like, well, I'm just going to use this one. Like, that's like Nearbound at work, right? It's like the trusted recommendation from HubSpot, where it's like, if you use HubSpot, this works really well. The other ones we don't vouch for. Like, clearly you're going to use the one HubSpot budget for.
And this is where I'm going to come back to what you said earlier too about. I just had a podcast with Jocko van der Koij, and Jocko from Winning by Design is one of the leading, revenue consultants for hypergrowth SaaS companies. Jocko's smart. He's wicked smart. And one of the things he was talking about in terms of macro shifts, I've been talking about, which is you better be wildly passionate and curious about the customer, right? The market, right? Strategic alliances. Strategic alliances are minted where you're moving markets, not moving product. Where is the market going? Right? Where is this inevitable future that you're like a year out, 2 years out, that you can pull everyone in that direction that others can't? So if you're an early stage startup and you lack product market fit, here's what I will tell you. Your startup's DOA. It's dead on arrival. The concept of product market fit, I even hate. It's actually market product fit. It's the market first. Your product's not first. The market's first. It is. It truly is. Your
Yeah.
product, who cares about your product? Only the market does. So you have to be an expert in the market first and foremost, right? And I'd lived in that market. I'd been an SMB CRM user for my entire startup life, right? Like that space was something that I understood. So PandaDoc, the predecessor to PandaDoc, was Quote Roller. And this was literally like 5 kids out of Belarus shipping this product. Like no one knew who was using it. But I used these products. I'd used SMB CRM. I had a vision of like here's how these things need to operate in the future. All of this quote to cash process for SMB needs to be completely automated inside of CRM, other than design, for example. Like
Yeah.
I had a vision of the world that was it was inevitable. How do I know it's inevitable? Because that's the world that I live in right now.
Yeah.
Like
It also helps because you're your own best user, right? Like you're like one of the customers. Like you said, like the way to identify alliance partners, or the way to understand who is going to win, is probably to just use all the tools and then decide for yourself, like this is the one which is going to win. Like our customers love it, we love it, etc. Like you're not going to like, strike an alliance with somebody where you think like that tool is really garbage, right? Or
I'll give you an example
is there
unrelated to
another
both of
way to
those.
find your alliance partner apart from like just being the customer and using the tool yourself?
Bingo. I'll give you an example unrelated to you or me. Let's say you sell into ed tech. Here would be
Yeah.
my number one piece of advice to that CEO: hire teachers.
Because they're customers.
Bingo. Like it's all about customer centricity. Nearbound is about surrounding your buyer with the things that they understand. And what I can tell the partner professionals out there, like, you better find something you're wildly passionate about and that you can become an expert in. Why? Because industry hopping is the death to most careers. How do you go from MarTech to healthcare manufacturing and think that you're bringing anything of value with you? No, you've like AE's the hop industry to industry. You're leaving your network, which is your most valuable. Is your net worth your network, your net worth? Yeah, it kind of is. You're leaving it behind every time.
Yeah.
Right. So like I've been in this, SaaS GTM space now for over a decade. Right. Like that's the space that I understand, and that's my network. Why would I all of a sudden pivot into manufacturing? I'm starting from scratch. It's a zero. So whenever
Yeah.
I did that with like Drift and Marketo, right, I'd already partnered with a MarTech company, right? I get increasingly better over time. Humans fail to grasp the power of compound interest and exponential gains earned over time, right? The curve
Yeah.
is very flat until it's not.
Yeah. And I think it's so true for network, like you mentioned, because I wrote this article about an alliance between Microsoft and Facebook, which Dan Rose, the VP of partnership at the time, closed. It was like $100 million deal. It was a huge deal at the time for Facebook and funded their entire development. And he just kind of like explains really casually how he just knew somebody at Microsoft who like had access to the C-suite and then just like won this deal. And that's like one of the big things which a lot of people struggle with these alliances. Like, where do you find that internal champion? And I guess for Dan Rose, the example was just he's been in the industry for like 10, 20 years beforehand, worked at Amazon and Facebook, etc. beforehand. So he just knew people who like happened to then move to Microsoft, and he could just like access the boardroom like that, right? Are there any other ways you can access champions apart from like just being in the industry for so long and like knowing the right people?
Yeah, I mean, champions are created; they're not born, right? Like, so you have to create that champion. And what that means is that your first job is, what are you selling them on? This isn't, you don't have a SKU. When you're selling a strategic alliance, let me be clear, you are selling. You are absolutely selling. What are you selling? Well, it's not a product SKU. In my opinion, it's probably a deck, right? And it's a 10-slide deck, and it's an undeniable, you're selling a shift, an undeniable change in the world, right? What's at stake for the winners and the losers, right? What will the winners be doing? And then what are you taking together to be the winners in this place where everyone else does not see this shift or is not responding to it? And that can come in the form of a powered by partnership, in a big integration, a GSI thing, or whatever those things are. But I typically follow that format of like undeniable shift in the world, change of behavior. What are the winners going to have to do? What are the losers not going to respond to? And then what are we going to do together? Like
Yeah.
when I pitched Drift and Marketo, here was the end state of that, Franz, is that it's the Marketo Adobe Summit. Steve Lucas, the CEO of Marketo, gives his closing keynote. And you know what he says? He says, and that's why I'm so excited to introduce conversational ABM with David Cancel, the CEO of Drift. Come up here, David. I closed out a 19,000 person summit with the announcement of an alliance product because the CEO believed in conversational ABM so much. I didn't send out the press release. The press release went out from Adobe, right? We took over their event, their closing keynote. So what are you selling? Mike, the champion on that deal was Sarah Kennedy, the CMO of Marketo, right? I had to work Sarah for 9 months to make her see like, hey, conversational ABM, basically taking the power of marketing automation and targeting to email to the website, right? That's all that it was, is like dynamic chat, right? Different users get different messages. And I'm like, this is going to be the thing. And it has been the thing that's converting more contacts into the Marketo database, which is increasing your net dollar retention, which is the number one thing that Vista and Adobe want to see.
Because they charge.
Here's the CSMs. Right. And then here's the CSMs that are like, hey, I just closed an $80,000 upsell with Shopify because Drift was throwing so many more contacts in the Marketo database. And then I'm showing Sarah, hey, here's how you're going to look great to the board. And this is why we're going to launch this on the main stage of it. You even have to have the audacity to say that. I said, and this is why we're going to launch this on the main stage of Steve Lucas's keynote at the Adobe Summit. And you think the first time I said that, did I stand out from the 1,700 other partners? Yeah, she was like,
the audacity.
What? Like, no, you're not.
I think, this is something which we talked about before. Like, we had like several chats and like nerding out about alliances, etc. And I think like one of the big things which people forget is like, yeah, you can show like, oh, we'll enter more, entries into your database, which helps you make more money. But that in itself is not interesting. Like, it's probably true, but it's not exciting. Like, there definitely needs to be some sort of like aspirational storytelling element where you actually put it into the bigger picture. And it's something which I, as a partnerships professional, have done wrong in the early stages of my career. Is like, I never looked at it as part of the bigger company strategy. I always looked at it as in like, okay, this is like you and me, how we can help each other, and that's it. But what makes it more exciting is like, how is this going to impact your companies as a whole and also your market as a whole, and position you to be like the leader in this new version of your market, rather than like just the old version.
Right. And I think that's where I'd encourage the listeners, everything Andy Raskin and his strategic narrative frameworks. Like, I've been a student of that for, going on 5-6 years now. He's right about all of it. Just literally take what Andy Raskin does and copy it verbatim, and it works. And if you can't figure it out, you don't have a deal. Like, basically his formula, he's open sourced most of it. And get this, friends, he charges $300,000 to do this with a company, and he takes 9 clients a year.
What a life.
Right?
Amazing. But you got to reach that stage. Okay, I have another question, just because I know we're hitting on time, but this is like super important.
Of course.
You mentioned the CMO of Marketo, Sarah, that you worked her for 9 months. Like, how did you even start that conversation? Like, how do you even get on her radar? Like, did you just email her like a message and was like, hey, we're this startup Drift, and also we're going to be your biggest partner in a year? Or was there a warm introduction or something like that?
So this is where like Nearbound surround, right? Like, you have to not be the only person talking to the person you're trying to influence. It's much better if the people that are around them are influencing them whenever you're not in the room, right? And I actually worked my way up from, partner program manager to Shail Fondery, which was like the VP of partnerships, to TK Cotter, who was the SVP of partnerships, who sold ToutApp to Marketo, to Jill Rowley, who is the chief growth officer, who now works with me. And, like, do these things work? Like, Jill saw me do that and was like, what a game changer for startups. Like, everyone should be thinking this way. And then that was, Sarah. So like, I worked myself up from program level manager to executive to, senior executive to C-suite to another C-suite person. Right. So that there's a cascade that needs to happen throughout that, and you have to earn that trust throughout. But here's one of the most tactical plays. I've dropped it here or there, but people never catch it. And I did this with Amit, who was the VP of partnerships at Adobe, who reported directly to Shantanu, responsible for a giant ecosystem. I just call it the circle back play. And here's what I would do for key executives that I know need to be decision makers on deals, like alliances or what have you. I'll send them updates once a month, friends, which is like, hey, just FYI, here's what happened here, here, and here. We closed these giant upsells. These things happen. No need to respond. Just letting you know. And I have the read receipts. So like, I did this, at Adobe when I finally signed the $6 million deal with them. I did that 8 times with Amit before I got a meeting. Just to circle back, like, hey, here's what's happening. Here's the key highlights. No need to respond. I never asked for a meeting. And then whenever I asked for a meeting, he responded within 5 minutes.
Nice.
Same thing with kind of Sarah.
But how do you make sure that like the partner manager doesn't feel like you're stepping on his toes, right? Because they're probably managing like 1,000
Oh my gosh, I
partners
want to cuss so bad. I want to
and
cuss so bad. Fuck them. This is what I want to say. Like, I don't care. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm shifting a market. Your job is not to gatekeep a vision of the world that I need to manifest into existence. And if you feel like your job as a partner person is to placate a frontline partner manager, get another job.
yeah, it's true.
I'm not
I mean, a
kidding.
lot of partner managers do see themselves as gatekeepers. They gatekeep the time of the product team, the time of the customer success team, the time of their VPs, etc. But at the same time, like, that might also stifle
Well,
innovation.
you're good. You're playing their game, and the goal of the game is to win. It's not to play their game.
Well, I guess their game is to keep their job, especially if you're a large company like Adobe, like Facebook, something like that. Like, you're not there to like move the company. Like, that's
Well,
insane.
all three
Like,
partner
only
program
crazy people would
managers,
assume you can do that.
uh, all partner program managers at HubSpot and all partner program managers at Adobe, for example, like these are people I can call today that are like, do you think they looked good? They looked fantastic, right? They looked very good. That like that, out of 1,700 partners at Adobe, that Glenn, he got his partner one partner of the year.
Yeah.
Right. So he looked fantastic too. So you're keeping everyone up to date, but you're just showing them that you're playing at a different level. You're playing to win.
Yeah.
Right. And I sell people on that. You notice how I told Sarah, I'm going to be launching on the keynote of the main stage. I told Brad Coffey, I'm going to be your number one partner. Tell your partner program manager, if you have conviction that this is an alliance that you need, say, I'm going to be your most important partner in your book. You have 40 other partners. I'm number one. And I'm going to prove it to you and then prove it to them. And then they'll go to bat for you. But don't just say, hey, I'm one of 40. How do I best optimize my program for you? No, tell them you're different. Tell them you're number one. And then go
Yeah.
prove it to them week over week.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not enough to just talk the talk. Like, you have to walk the walk. Like, you have to put in the alliance effort, which is why you probably only want to have one of them, because it's such an insane amount of effort to actually pull this off.
Yeah, I had a 5-person partner team, and I was handling the Adobe account myself for the first year, right?
Yeah. Wild. Okay. I know we're up on time, and I know everybody else, and you included, is very busy today, and I have to go back to diaper duties. But I want to make sure we draw our winners. So if you haven't done this yet, we're going to give you a couple of seconds. Just enter hashtag Nearbound into the chat. Right now, we only have 3 entries, which is phenomenal, because that means you have a very high chance of winning. But if you add hashtag Nearbound in the chat right now, you can be entered into the raffle to win a hardcover copy of Jared's book. And before we leave, I want to ask you one last question, because this is something which I wondered about in the book, is why are industry giants so hard to partner with? Like, a lot of these like really large companies have built their success off of partners, but it doesn't feel like they make it easy for anybody to partner with them. Let's take Salesforce as an example. Like, there's a very straightforward program, but then you also have to pay. You have to build an integration. They normally recommend you a partner to build that integration for you, which is like 150K, etc. Like, it doesn't feel like straightforward to partner with this company as a small startup. Why do you think that?
Here's what I can say is that partner programs like Salesforce, which is very mature, extremely mature. There are tiers, there are levels of Salesforce measures its success based on how much money they receive from App Exchange, rev share, right? So like by default, if you're doing 10 million in sales or 20 million in sales as a startup, how could you possibly ever be at the stage of a company doing billions in sales and giving Salesforce dozens of millions or hundreds of millions, right? That is a completely different playbook. I'm not saying don't play the partner program game. I'm saying if that's the only game that you're playing, there's no way you'll ever land in an alliance, right? So why are they so hard to partner with? Is they design these programs to filter, the top paying partners to the top. Play that game, but also play the alliance one where you're trying to take something new to market that falls outside the scope, launching new products, right? Power by stuff that is an entrepreneurial endeavor. But I'd say why are they so hard to partner with? It's because their programs are so built up.
Yeah, that's true. And they are so built up because they have so much interest, right? So you need to find a productive way of funneling that, and also give partners a reason why they should work hard to like reach a certain tier or something like that. But that's kind of like, a job in a company where you like have to like get promoted to a certain level of VP or executive or whatever. And similarly, you can get promoted in your partner program, versus there's the entrepreneurial route, which is uncharted territory, but you can actually just, play your own game at some point.
You can shortcut, right? So you play both.
Yeah.
But my point is, if you're only playing the partner program, listed tiers game, you will only get what they tell you can get.
Yeah.
and you're not in charge. That's not a strategic alliance. That's not an entrepreneurial endeavor. You're an order taker being told something by some, program orchestration ecosystem manager that designed a program that you're supposed to ascend, which, good for you. That's not me.
Don't be an order taker.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're going to leave everybody on that. But before we go, we're going to draw real quick a winner for a hardcover copy of Nearbound. And the winner is, drum roll, David Schwartz.
Hey, what's
Congratulations,
up, David?
I'll be in touch with you to get your details and send you your copy of Nearbound. Jarrett, this was awesome. Thanks so much for spending your time with us today. Any closing words before we wrap up the show?
No, let's just go build a world where everyone can win together. We have a moment. We have a seat at the table. Get off the sidelines. Get on the field. Start calling some shots. Embrace it, because GTM, SaaS, our entire space is it's in a tough spot right now. We're still early innings in this decade of the ecosystems, as Jay McBain puts it. So recognize the weight of the responsibility that you have. It's no longer an opportunity, it's a responsibility. And that means something entirely different.
100%. This was awesome. Thanks so much, Jarrett. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Mary, David, Drew, you could have been anywhere and you chose to spend this time with us. So I really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another show. And then from then on, we keep our 2 weeks cadence live on LinkedIn. See you then.